White supremacy is an ideological plague that has been warmly its way into the modern consciousness of America. It is slowly being embedded into the mainstream through protests and political turmoil, which is causing even normal sites to argue about things that should be on the far right and far left margins of American discourse. This is causing a slow degradation of civil rights we have fought for since antebellum America and since the 1960 civil rights movement. This speech today is concerning how do we quarantine this change in America? How do we limit these philosophies to the back recesses of American thought where they belong? And this is going to start with Richard Spencer, who is a prominent white supremacist, whose name we're going to use to be emblematic of every prominent white supremacist that the Southern Poverty Center lists as a hate group. Richard Spencer cannot be welcome to speak at colleges because his views and those of other white supremacists do not hold academic merit. The costs are exorbitantly high, and that when you allow them to do so, you allow people to believe that these are views that can be debated when really they should not be in any circumstance. Now, we should all care about this intensely. The reason Richard Spencer and others like going to colleges is because they believe that we are the bastions of learning. That when you go to the privilege of going to public Ivy or top university, your ideas become the policies of tomorrow and they try to influence you, but you should fight them. I'm very passionate about this issue. I wrote a column for Miami Student just about this, and as a son of two journalists, I understand that rhetoric matters in American consciousness. This past election on both sides shows that if you repeat something over and over, people eventually believe it to be true, even if it is not at all. Now first I want to talk about Richard Spencer. That's him. He's a very prominent white supremacist, and his mantra or thesis are what's called the 14 words of power. We must secure the existence of our people and the future for white children. He also is a primary organizer of the Charlottesville rally. Now he differs from Milo Yiannopoulos, who came to speak at our college last year. While Milo is flamboyantly aggressive, he is a member of the alt-right party, and his policies, like increased immigration laws, well, farther to the right, are a cornerstone of the current executive branch of America. So we can't say he can't be allowed to speak. He is an important man. His ideas have been reflected. But that differs from someone like Richard Spencer, I'll skip over this slide quickly because I can just read that, who says that he considers race a combination of a breed and a species. That, in my opinion, disqualifies you from going to speaking at Armstrong and Millett. When you speak to the point that you can attend that conference and rationally debate among yourself, does the speaker have good points? But when you talk about white supremacy, there is no rational debate at that instant. Now, many of you, as I'm sure I'm saying right now, I agree, Paolo, his views are abhorrent, but on the other hand, the First Amendment protects him. The First Amendment is constantly misinterpreted. He is allowed to speak, and if he comes to Miami's campus and he was to stand outside here, he should be allowed to speak, he should not be allowed. He should not be accosted or assaulted, he should be heard out. The difference between that and university providing him housing at Armstrong and Millett or any theater for him to speak as a university event, that's actually prohibited. To give you an example, as many of you guys might know, there are hate speech preachers that come here about once a year. They go and they say homosexuality is sin, and if you have sex, you go to hell immediately, all that stuff. And they're allowed to speak and they're protected, but they're not given Armstrong because their ideas are not academically viable. And the same treatment should be given to Richard Spencer. Another issue is that the cost is actually very high for these figures to come to school. University of Florida estimated they spent $600,000 when Spencer came to the school in just protection. And going to Miami's website, that's the equivalent of about 20 students' yearly tuition going to fund one speaker for an hour-and-a-half long lecture. And since this is a state school, that would mean that your taxpayer money and those of your parents are actually going to pay for white supremacists to espouse his ideologies to an unwilling campus, which I think is demonstrably unfair. And the part three, and this is really important, is that, as mentioned before, what he says and what you believe in goes into the mainstream thought. I truly don't believe that a normal person going to a Richard Spencer rally leaves us saying that's a rational person and agree with his ideas. The fact is that if you agree with him after he speaks, you probably agree with him before he speaks by how you were raised. But the point is that when he can speak at campuses, now the bar is lowered for what is acceptable. I don't want to touch our presidency because I don't want this to be a political issue. I think Republicans and Democrats agree on this unanimously. But for instance, Stephen Gorka, who was a member of the cabinet but of the advisors of Trump, his full name is Stephen L.V. Gorka. The V stands for his role in a white supremacist Hungarian militant group. Now, to Trump's credit, Stephen Gorka has since been expelled from office. But the point is that this didn't happen in Bush, Reagan, Obama, Clinton's White Houses. There weren't white supremacists, Stephen Miller and Stephen Gorka, speaking and advising. The bar's been lowered because Charlottesville considered a normal thing. The people on both sides are correct. And that can't happen, and that starts with people saying that if you have these ideas, you're not respected at these colleges, you aren't allowed to speak at these colleges. So I want call to action. The fact is that universities are fighting him, some successfully, some not. Just last week, Ohio State said he cannot come to campus, so he's closer than you think. And he does respond, and Richard Spencer does obviously sue if you say you can't speak there, and says he's successful, signs the college is successful. But the point is that if he comes, you petition universities saying do not let him come. And also, if he does come, just don't attend. They crave support, they need attention, they need big fights and protests to gain this attention that Charlottesville Live showed. So just ignore him, and eventually this issue will go away as did in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And a good example of this, of how it becomes mainstream, is this, which I can't really say out loud. This was a city commissioner in Texas saying these words. This is not from the 60s, it's from a few weeks ago. I'm not going to pretend that no one was racist before this, or that racism has declined, but the difference between now and what I believe was a few years ago is he didn't resign after this. He did not feel the need to resign, or there would be enough public pressure for him to, after these clearly, overtly racist things. So that's the point that we have to suppress these words that are meant to oppress half the nation. Because to do so is to limit their is because they do not have academic merit, they are too costly, and we can't let these ideas infect modern American discourse. Thank you.